Football is in the air in Columbia, South Carolina as the 2024 season begins. The Gamecocks and the Old Dominion Monarchs set to do battle at Williams-Brice Stadium, and myself and Cole Thompson are here to break it down, give you our full preview, predictions, everything you need to know for the Week 1 matchup. Hello, everyone. I'm Chris Phillips. He's Cole Thompson. Appreciate each and every single one of you tuning in. Make sure you like, subscribe, turn notifications. Check us out via podcast, wherever you get your podcast. You can also find us across all social media platforms, as well as our website, SECUnfiltered.com. We're brought to you by our friends over at Prize Picks, prizepicks.com. Head over there and use the promo code SECU at sign up to get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 or more lineup. Again, guys, that's prizepicks.com, promo code SECU to get your $50 bonus today. South Carolina, Old Dominion will do battle at Williams-Brice Stadium to kick off the 2024 season in Columbia. We're breaking it down, previewing, predicting everything you need to know for the Week 1 matchup, folks. I'm Chris Phillips. I'm joined by my good friend, co-host, colleague, Cole Thompson, helping me break down everything Gamecocks and Monarchs. Cole, what's going on, man? Appreciate you taking the time.
You know, it's very hurtful to hear some of these South Carolina fans come for me when I am one of the only few people that has said for the last few years, not only do you have the right coach, but you've been the most underappreciated team in the SEC. But I see you sometimes in the comments section calling me out. But like I've said, you are a wild card team. You are a wild, ravenous bunch of fan bases. And more importantly, I embrace the hatred that I get because I'm going to continue to show you love. And that is what makes me the best person on this damn channel. And I can all just go ahead and say it. You're a wild card team. Go ahead and prove me wrong that you are not a wild card team this year, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, Cole, when it comes to name pronunciations, tomato, whatever. Hey, at least there's no Nico to talk about, right? When it comes to that last name.
But I can say the last name. That's the difference.
I said it successfully in our Tennessee Game 1 preview, by the way. I'd like you to know that on record. But we're not talking about Tennessee. We're talking about the South Carolina Gamecocks taking on the Old Dominion Monarchs as the 2024 season gets rolling in Columbia, Saturday, August the 31st, 4:15 p.m. Eastern time kickoff. Cole, with the ESPN, ABC, the new TV schedules and such, we're going to kind of get some of these odd kickoff times. So 4:15 p.m. Eastern it is. On the SEC network, you can catch the ball game. Of course, the game being played in Columbia at Williams-Brice Stadium. South Carolina, Cole, a 20.5-point favorite in this game. The over-under is set at 55.5, and this will be the first meeting between these two teams. Cole, we're going to talk about Old Dominion really quickly. What's interesting about this matchup, though, you know, we've been breaking down, if you've been following along to some other games or what have you, but you notice on the schedule either way, there's a lot of these FBS, SCS matchups where we've seen 40 and 50-point spreads. This one, not so much. There's a little bit more juice in this one. Not to say that South Carolina should be on some upset alert, but you look at Old Dominion, Cole. This is a program last year that went to a bowl game, 6-7, 5-3 in the conference. Could have been even better. 11 of 13 games decided by one score a season ago. They returned their quarterback in Grant Wilson. Their top wide receiver, Isaiah Page, returns as well. The big knock against them, Cole, and we're going to talk about more about this when we dive into the actual game stuff. The big question for them is going to be the offensive line. It was the worst in FBS a season ago. They surrendered 62 sacks. They averaged 5 a game. Could not protect the quarterback. So we'll see if South Carolina can take advantage. They do have an All-American linebacker in Jason Henderson who's returning. Cole, he had 170 tackles last year. Led all of FBS. They got an all-Sun Belt defensive tackle, Denzel Lowry, who's back, along with Chris Trinidad up front. No returning starters in the secondary. They did add North Texas safety Patrick Smith-Young, who had 77 tackles for the Mean Green last season. So, Cole, before we dive into the specifics of the matchup, give our thoughts and everything, and, of course, our predictions, your thoughts on the opponent, Old Dominion. Again, a Sun Belt foe. I know you love the Fun Belt, as do I. Old Dominion not at the top of that league by any means, but you know, this isn't, again, your typical run-of-the-mill, like, FCS opponent where you're favored by 40 or 50. Old Dominion is a team, it goes without saying, that comes in with a pulse, with some playmakers, and could potentially give South Carolina some headaches.
I don't want to say they'll give them headaches, but I think what they'll do is they'll be able to keep things interesting. You got to remember that last year they did so against a team like Wake Forest. And I'm not comparing Wake Forest to South Carolina, but when you don't have every question mark filled and when you have some overall concerns with the consistency of your roster early in the season, they will attack that. And Jason Henderson, as you brought up, one of the best linebackers in college football last year. I mean, he averaged, I think it was 6.5 tackles on the road, 9.5 tackles at home per game. I mean, he was literally everywhere for the Monarchs, and you might as well just crown him king of that defense, because if he is the king of the Sun Belt right now, he has dominated against competition. He's been really productive when it comes to playing in blitz packages, when it comes to playing in coverage. He's made a name for himself, and honestly, it's very surprising when you see guys like him and Colorado State's Torrey Horton stay committed to their program when you know NIL is a big thing, and they would be upgrades at multiple positions for schools in the SEC. So you look at that, that's a big statement for them to be able to come on in and have that type of level of atmosphere, but also that level of leadership. I like what I've seen so far from Old Dominion in what they bring in. They also retained one of their star players, their wide receiver that was going to transfer to Texas A&M. Last second decides to come on back. He wants to be a part of the program in his final year instead of going big. Rather be a big fish in a small pond. And so now you get to go ahead and separate yourself. The thing that I think you wonder about for this team, especially with South Carolina, they return 9 defensive starters. They're really loaded on that side. And if you already talked about the level of sacks that is being allowed by the Monarchs, you should be able to feast. Like, it should be a day in the backfield for you. But at the same time, I could say the same thing about South Carolina with their offensive line, because it was a turnstile last year. You had literally no help for Spencer Rattler. You had no help for the ground game. You had no help in the passing attack. So do you feel confident that you made the necessary moves in the offseason to better your odds to feel like that your offensive line is going to be competent enough in this matchup? Because let's be real, at the end of the day, this should be a win for South Carolina. This should be a very easy, I would say, trajectory win for this program. You like the direction that this team is going in, but it's not one that you want to over-exacerbate, or more importantly, you want to overlook. Because of, again, we've seen in the past where Old Dominion, they feel like that they're a team that has some pieces in play. Maybe it's enough to go ahead and get them over the top.
To your point, Cole, we've seen Old Dominion in years past, and I know it was against some really porous Virginia Tech teams, you could argue, but we've seen Old Dominion on stages like this take down the big dog. Now, again, this is a different setting, different year, different teams, etc. But I do think they'll come into this ball game. They will not be enfazed, won't be intimidated, I should say, by the task at hand. That being said, to your point, this game, a lot of it's about South Carolina. So let's dive into the game itself, Cole, the matchups. You got to start with LaNorris Sellers. The LaNorris Sellers era begins in Columbia. I know you're excited to see this kid. I'm excited to see this kid. You saw glimpses last year, right? He had the run against Vanderbilt. He had the touchdown pass against Furman. But you've had this entire offseason. You're QB1. You're the man. You're the guy. This is your offense. This offense is built around you. When you look at this first game, Cole, what are you most excited to see, and what do you most want to see from LaNorris Sellers in week 1?
You know, for me, it doesn't even have anything to do with LaNorris Sellers, because last year we continue to hear Spencer Rattler's our guy, but 16, we got rec specs. We're excited to go ahead and bring him in. I want to see this offensive line. That is the biggest thing for me. They went out and they added in some new names via the portal. They added in Josiah Thompson, the 4-star offensive tackle. Does he find a way into the starting lineup week 1? I want to see how this line is able to be protective for a young quarterback, because the one thing that is so important for any team is the confidence of the man under center. If you have a confident quarterback and a competent quarterback, you can take on the world. You can easily hold your own against quality opponents. One of the reasons why South Carolina marched on in and beat the living breaks out of Tennessee was because of their offensive line gave Spencer Rattler time after time to deliver strike after strike down the field. Even when he had to move outside the pocket, you have that mobile element when it comes to Sellers, a guy that maybe isn't going to be known as a full-fledged runner with the highlight speed of Jalen Milroe, but he's going to tuck his shoulder. He's going to play a lot like Josh Allen, be able to run, pick up that first down, not be afraid of contact. But if you have an offensive line that can set the tone very early on in the season, a quarterback is going to garner that confidence. And with that in mind, you also have some new wide receivers that you're breaking in. Who is that number one? who is the face of this team now with Xavier Legette gone, now with Juice Wells down in Oxford, who takes over as the playmaking highlight reel, and more importantly, the security blanket for a young quarterback. Because the two things that you always want for a young quarterback is somebody you can trust whenever you got to get a big play, and an offensive line that will keep you upright whenever you feel under pressure.
Cole, I agree with you on the offensive line. I've been asked many times over the course of this offseason, is the key for South Carolina LaNorris Sellers? Like, he needs to play to a certain level. And I don't disagree, right? If you don't have a quarterback, you don't have a chance. There are going to be moments this season where LaNorris Sellers needs to be special. But when you look at this kid, you look at the intangibles, you look at the measurables, I think we all understand his ability, but it's what's around him. I mean, that's really the big question. Who's going to help out? So to your point, the offensive line for the Gamecocks, it was abysmal a season ago. There were a lot of young guys that were in there, baptism by fire in the SEC, Big Tree Babalade, Jatavius Shivers, Trovon Bowe. Have they taken a step forward, right? Do we see, and you can say, well, it's Old Dominion, you can't draw any conclusions, and that's totally fine. But Cole, you and I both know not all wins are created equally. So
sure,
even if you win the game 35-0, do you win the game 35-0, but it's because of a bunch of defensive turnovers and defensive scores, and your offensive, like, you couldn't rush for 100 yards or 150 yards, and you leave certain games. I've seen it firsthand with my own two eyes. You leave games like this, and you say, hey, you got the win, but man, your offensive line couldn't get a run push or struggled to get a run push. And if you're struggling to get a run push against Old Dominion, what are you going to do against Kentucky in week 2? What are you going to do against LSU in week 3? What are you going to do down the road against these other SEC opponents? So I agree with the offensive line paving the way. I think the perfect scenario, some people are going to say it's LaNorris Sellers throwing for 300, rushing for 100. No, if you run the football for 200, 250 yards, Rocket Sanders, Oscar Attaway are able to feature why everyone's so excited about them, Jawarn Howell, the South Carolina State transfer. Get the running game going. Help out a young quarterback, like you mentioned. I am really excited to see what the offense looks like with LaNorris Sellers. Like, what's the dynamic? Dabble Loggins, how are they calling this thing? Because last year, the offensive identity, Cole, for South Carolina was let Spencer Rattler drop back and throw it 35 times because you can't run the ball at all. I mean, that was, and it didn't work out very well, right? And Spencer Rattler was constantly under duress. Who can forget you start the season by surrendering 9 sacks? So, I think you're going to see a lot more quarterback run game, Cole. I think you're going to see LaNorris Sellers getting outside the pocket, getting on the move. For LaNorris Sellers specifically, I just want to see good decision-making. That's really all it comes down to. I want to see him making good decisions, the offense being in rhythm. I know it's a lot of new pieces, but you'd like to see them as on time and on pace as you can possibly get, getting ahead of the sticks, if you will, not stupid, self-inflicted negative plays, if you will. So I think that's the big thing for LaNorris Sellers. They're not going to show a lot probably, with Kentucky looming in week 2. And then to your point about the wide receiver position, man, that's another thing I wrote down here is, do we have any early signs of maybe someone emerging at the wide receiver 1 position? Guys like Nick Harbor, Mazeo Bennett, Tyshawn Russell, many others you picked up in the transfer portal. Jared Brown from Coastal Carolina, Amari Huggins Bruce, I believe, from Miami of Ohio. Either way, you picked up a bunch from Louisville transfer. You picked up a bunch of other guys. Do we have early signs of a wide receiver 1? Who are going to be, to your point, Cole, I think you put it beautifully, who are going to be the pieces that help out LaNorris Sellers? Because I can tell you this off the rip. If you're basing the success of the season, if you're putting it all on the shoulders of a redshirt freshman quarterback, I don't care how talented that guy is, that is a recipe for struggle. That is a recipe for struggle in the SEC.
It's the same thing that you talk about with our friend, and I will say his last name, Nico Iamaleava. I've tried having this conversation with Tennessee people. I get it. You love the quarterback. I love the fact that you believe that this is a difference maker. And I'll be completely transparent. Going into 2025, if there is a scenario where we see a bunch of players leave for the NFL draft this offseason, LaNorris Sellers has a very good shot of showing up at SEC Media Days as QB1, if not QB2 in the SEC. He's that talented of a player. But every young quarterback needs a supporting cast. It doesn't matter what university you're at. It doesn't matter what you feel like that you brought in the portal for the future of the organization. It's about the current times. And when you look at Sellers, last season with Spencer Rattler, you would have had a better shot of trotting out 5 refrigerators and then moving them in front of Spencer Rattler to let defensive linemen try to get past them than at times you had last year with the offensive line. And that's not to be insulting to Columbia. That's not to be insulting to Gamecock Nation. It's just the truth. And part of the reason why you remember last year that you went 5-7 was because you had a veteran quarterback in Spencer Rattler that was able to bail you out of trouble when there were moments of greatness. And I think that we kind of forget how great Spencer Rattler was the last 2 years in Como. I mean, not in Como, in Columbia, because of we know just how he was able to work with less. And so I don't want to see that from LaNorris Sellers. What I do want to see, and this is a big stat that does not get brought up enough about South Carolina, and one of the few blessings that was underneath Dowell Loggins' offense. Can you build off of having a great red zone offense last year? Last season, South Carolina ranked 24th nationally in red zone conversions, whether that was on field goals, whether that was on touchdowns. They were top 5 in red zone touchdowns among SEC teams. Can you be that this year with a brand new supporting cast, with a brand new quarterback? With a quarterback that also will have run design plays added to his repertoire, because if that is something that he has been known for during his time when he was in high school, and even last year there were conversations about potentially utilizing him in that sense. Also, what I want to know is there a role for Robbie Ashford? You know, even though we don't expect it to be this way. We expect it to be LaNorris Sellers as QB1. But part of the thing that was enticing last year about Auburn's offense was they had a role in a game plan for Ashford. Now he comes on over to Columbia. Can he be that guy? Can there be a unique dynamic play design to where you know that the ball is getting in his hands, whether it is as a running quarterback, whether it is 2 quarterbacks lined up at the backfield, maybe it's a swing pass to a swing pass down the field. You are allowed to kind of make some trickery plays in this game if you want, once you feel comfortable with the lead that you've gained. The other thing that's really important, how do you capitalize on turnovers? I truly believe, and I said in a video, that the X factor for South Carolina this year is their defense. When you bring back as many starters as you did, you should be able to set a standard inside of Williams-Brice Stadium. If you have a guy that is able to go ahead and make a big-time play, how do you, as the offense, capitalize with the short field position, being put at midfield, making sure that turnover isn't wasted? How do you make sure that that is a benefactor in your back pocket?
And Cole, lastly on the offense, where we flipped to the other side, you know, we mentioned some of the other guys on Old Dominion's defense, right? Jason Henderson, Denzel Lowry. This is an Old Dominion defense up in the front 7 that has talent. So I think for South Carolina, it's you come out of the gate, it's a game you should win, but it's a nice, at least somewhat test, because there are guys on that defense, I think, that will make you pay if you're out of position or you're not making the plays you're supposed to, not picking up your guy, whatever it might be. So I'm also excited to see Joshua Simon, the tight end, when you're looking for a number 1 target. Can he emerge in this game? Was pretty good for them last year. And to your point, Robbie Ashford, maybe he spilled the beans in fall camp. He's mentioned, I mean, we're both going to play. They haven't named a starter. We all know the starter's going to be, but I think you're going to see a lot of Robbie Ashford, to your point. I think we will probably see a lot of him in this week 1 matchup. I know South Carolina's hoping maybe second half it's the Robbie Ashford show because the score is what it is. But switching to the defensive side, Cole, you mentioned, I think the big storyline in this game, I mean, Old Dominion, can you protect your quarterback? And if you're South Carolina, can you take advantage? I mean, that's the big thing, right? I mean, you give up 62 sacks a season ago. This is 2024. You've revamped. You've probably added guys, but I mean, how much better can you get, really? And for South Carolina, you were not good last year getting after the quarterback. You'd like to, and it really from the jump, Cole, you know, the tone was set early on against North Carolina, and the defense struggled. I mean, for 75% of the season, the defense inexplicably really struggled. You bring back a lot of veteran presence. You added a lot of guys to that front 7. To your point, I agree. I think if South Carolina is going to have a successful year, the defense has got to be much better start to finish, and it starts in this game 1 against Old Dominion, who feels like, again, looking at their personnel, what they struggled with last year, feels like they're really gettable for the Gamecocks in this game.
One thing that I love is that you bring back Tonka Hemingway. That is a guy that I listed as one of the more underappreciated players in the SEC. He had 7 pass deflections last year as a defensive tackle. That means that he was winning his one-on-one matchups at the line of scrimmage and batting the ball down with immediately making you have to go back to the playbook. Do you have other guys around him that can elevate that status? Do you have guys that can penetrate that middle interior part of the line that are going to be able to put pressure on quarterbacks? And the main reason I want to see it in this game, Chris, is because of what you got in the next game. That's SEC versus SEC. That's where the wins truly count. And this is a young but also inexperienced offensive line when it comes to Kentucky, where they bring in a lot of transfers, but you don't know if they're going to mesh together early on in the season. And sometimes these are games that we talk about that eventually will carry a lot of weight in the trajectory of two teams by the season's end. We're talking about potentially, what does this fork in the road mean for the Wildcats and the Gamecocks? If you can set this tone in this game and be able to capitalize against what is for what I would say, underappreciated defensive front, but also a very underwhelming front when you're talking about the Monarchs. If you can set the tone in that game, what does that mean to carry on over into the next week? Where that game, the one that you know is going to be so influentially important to your success, to the success of Shane Beamer moving forward, to really just boost morale in Columbia for the rest of the season. That's what I'm wondering about. I think that Debo Williams, once again, is one of the better linebackers in the SEC. I think that when you look at that secondary, there's a lot of unknown, but a lot of positive unknown. I mean, you return your starting safeties, both of them. So you feel really good about that. I'm excited to see how this defense can capitalize. But the best thing for any young unit or any veteran unit, the more pressure that you put up front, the more turnovers are going to come on the back.
Cole, let's lock in some predictions. South Carolina and Old Dominion doing battle at Williams-Brice Stadium. I'll start with you. Will it be a successful kickoff to the 2024 season for the Gamecocks?
South Carolina wins this game. I think they're going to win by double digits. What I wonder is, will you take your foot off the gas going into the fourth quarter that allows Old Dominion to maybe beat the spread? You said the line was at 26.5, right?
20 and a half.
20 and a half feels like it's one of those push games where I might feel a little hesitant just because I haven't seen the offensive line in action. I don't know who's going to be that number one wide receiver. I don't know what you're going to get from Rocket Sanders. Is he going to blast off the way that we hope he can? I don't know what we're going to get from LaNorris Sellers in this game. So I'm not going to touch the line, but I will say I think that you do see competitive nature from this defense. I think they feast. I'm going to call it they get 6 sacks in the game. They get 2 turnovers in this game. I'm going to say that they also capitalize inside the red zone. Rocket Sanders scores a touchdown. Oscar Attaway scores a touchdown. LaNorris Sellers scores a touchdown on the ground. 1 passing touchdown, though, in this game. Go ahead and give me the Gamecocks 35-17. Actually, 35-14. My apologies.
35-14. So right on the spread. You do have South Carolina covering, but right on it. I would agree with you. It's a tricky line. You know, I said this earlier, Cole, that South Carolina, they won't show the entire playbook, nor should they. And I agree with that to a degree, not to be hypocritical based off what I said earlier in the show, but I think it's really important if you're South Carolina to come out and make a statement, right? I mean, it's been such an offseason full of uncertainty and talks of Shane Beamer and his seat and is it warming, and look at the schedule, and the projections have been 5-7 to 6-6, but they've been mostly, everyone's been down on South Carolina. Forget the whole save the playbook for week 2. I think you need to build momentum, right? If you can go out there and win this game by 4 touchdowns, 5 touchdowns, you need to do so. You need to impose your will. That being said, Cole, I can't pick it right now. There are just things I need to see with this Gamecocks offense specifically. You heard Jason Henry, the offensive lineman, a couple days ago in fall camp say, we're going to be a ground and pound team. And so I think about that, and I think about when is the last time South Carolina has been able to go be a ground and pound team and run the ball consistently and run it at will. Cole, it's been very rare over the last decade. I mean, the 2020 COVID year, they ran it when they wanted. Granted, they went 2-8. And then in 2014, they ran it when they wanted. Outside of that, it's been nothing but inconsistency. Is the offensive line still kind of working to gel together? How much of a stride has that taken? You got a young quarterback in LaNorris Sellers. Again, I want to see him make positive decisions, make good decisions, take care of the football. I do think they're going to utilize the run game a lot, though. I think it's going to shorten this ball game. I think, Cole, there could be some tense moments in this game. I think South Carolina wins this game. I have no doubt about that. But covering the 20.5, to your point, I would not be surprised if South Carolina covered. But to your point, I probably won't touch it because I've seen the Gamecocks in spots like these before, and you'd be surprised how often, especially that South Carolina tends to play down to its competition. I think, to your point, the defense is going to have a stellar day. I think the front seven's much more athletic than it was a season ago, but offensively is where my questions are for South Carolina, Cole, going into this season. So I got the Gamecocks getting the win. I think they focus on the ground game, which, again, shortens the game. You need to find some answers at the wide receiver position in this ball game. I don't know that you will. I think you'll see a lot, again, of LaNorris Sellers running the football, scrambling, the run game with Sanders and Attaway. Give me South Carolina 27-10, taking down Old Dominion. Again, Cole, I don't know that that's the margin of victory Gamecock fans are going to want. But number one, I don't think Old Dominion's a bunch of scrubs rolling. I'm not saying they're great, but they're going to come in this ball game fired up. They've won big games like this before. I could see early on, right? Especially, too, you got to think, LaNorris Sellers, first game start. There's so much new on this offense. It might take 2 or 3 or 4 drives to really get this thing humming and get this thing going. And so I think because of that, I think South kind of pulls away late. I think Cole at halftime, admittedly, it might be a little bit uncomfortable. Just call it for what it is. But I do think the Gamecocks pull away. They get the win 27-10.
Yeah, see, South Carolina fans, here's the number one thing. You already are getting a win. So be happy that you get a win to start off your season. Number two, both Chris and I agree that at the end of the day, you are going to beat the spread, even though we won't touch that line. And number three, I say nice things about you. So you should continue to subscribe to this channel and give me a lot of praise because I do believe that you will be one of the best teams in the SEC. Even though that some of you are my biggest fan right now. How dare you? I promise you, I'm a much nicer person than the man over here or here, whatever way this camera works.
So Cole Thompson and I both have the Gamecocks starting 1-0. How do you feel? South Carolina, Old Dominion, your preview, your predictions. How do you see this one playing out at Williams-Brice Stadium? Guys, that's going to do it all for us. Appreciate each and every single one of you tuning in. Make sure you like, subscribe, turn notifications. Check us out via podcast, wherever you get your podcast. You can also find us across all social media platforms as well as our website, SECUnfiltered.com. For Cole Thompson, I'm Chris Phillips. Appreciate each and every single one of you tuning in, and we'll catch you on the other side.